So I'm recording, and go ahead and introduce you. We'll get going. Thank you, everybody, for attending the October Eureka Texas Speaker Series. We've got a great presentation for you today, managing field work efforts with Collector for ArcGIS and the latest release enhancements. So today we have Dr. Elvis Takow, and he is a solutions engineer in the natural resources sector of ESRI, and he's agreed to talk to us about this important topic today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on over to you. So Elvis, we really appreciate you being here, and thanks again.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to make sure, Brian, you guys can see my screen just okay?
Correct. I see it just fine.
Perfect. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and present to this group today. I'm going to be talking about Collector for ArcGIS. Like Brian said, I'm a solution engineer at ESRI. I work in natural resources, predominantly helping customers understand how they can get business value out of our tools. So for today's presentation, I have a brief agenda. Basically, I'm going to give you a product overview. I'm assuming that most folks at this stage likely know what Collector is and understand the product, but I'm going to give you an overview anyway, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Then we're going to go through some general workflows on how you would use Collector, bearing in mind that we do have our latest version of Collector, which is available. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and folks are using the latest version and understand how the functionality works relative to the previous version, which is currently called Collector Classic. That being said, I'm going to touch very briefly on integration between Collector and Survey 123. Then we're going to talk about working offline. So basically, when you're doing field activity in those areas where you have very limited connectivity or you have no connectivity, how can you continue to do your work efficiently? And I know one of the highlights of Collector and using devices like Collector is the ability to capture high accuracy data. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how you can get Collector set up for capturing data, high accuracy data with one of the various options for GNSS receivers you can use. And we'll touch a little bit on maybe some tips or a tip or two and a little bit of what's next or what's currently been released in Collector. And hopefully we'll have some time for some brief questions and answers. So to get us started off, what is Collector? Well, Collector for ArcGIS is a field mobility app that's map-centric. And what does that mean? Well, it's built on the founding principles of ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise, essentially meaning that it uses a web map to drive what you collect in the field. Now, the user interface and the map within Collector are very focused. It's map focused and very, very much so map centric. It works where you need it to work. In other words, Collector supports you taking your maps offline and out in the field with little to no connectivity. Probably most important to a lot of our users is the support and integration with high accuracy GPS receivers to collect data in highly accurate spatial locations. You can also use Collector and sync it with these high precision GPS devices. Now, how are people actually using Collector today in the field? Well, there are lots of different ways and lots of different use cases we've seen thus far with Collector. And what it essentially has allowed folks to do is to remove paper out of the process. So instead of capturing information data out in the field on paper forms, as many of us still do today, you have an opportunity now to capture this information digitally using a device like Collector for ArcGIS. So some examples we see are the capturing of assets or simple observations, but even performing things like inspections using forms, right? Instead of using these paper-based forms, we can now start to use digital forms like Collector. Other common workflows we see are sign inventory, hydrant collections, or um, creating ground control points. Maybe you have a UAV flight you want to undertake, and you need to collect some ground control points. While collector is an application that would allow you to do precisely that. We've seen usage in areas where people are performing things like inspections, right? Replacing a lot of the sort of redundant and inefficient field processes, right? You have pipeline inspections and other types of pipeline operations. In one of the pictures here, you see someone doing a water valve inspection, where a lot of times you see water valves are clustered together in an area, but you really need to get down to that level of accuracy. So this particular individual has a range pole with a GNSS device to get that high level accuracy that she needs for her work. And one of the areas where I'm particularly familiar with the use of collector is in that realm of agriculture, which is an area I focus on. And so this is an example of a colleague using collector in the field for scouting. So in the vineyard industry or in the viticulture industry, oftentimes they're interested in scouting the individual vines, or just getting the level of accuracy of every vine within a particular block. So that's an example here. And if, as you can see, there's a lot of elevation there. So it's important to use a very accurate device to get the information you need. So now I'm going to step into some general workflows in terms of how to use collector. So what I'd like to do first is just go through conceptually what happens when you take collector out in the field, and then I'm going to switch over to my mobile device and actually show you how that would actually be done. So conceptually, what happens ahead of you taking your device out into the field to actually start to collect information? Well, the first thing, and probably the most important thing, is that you need to create a feature layer to collect data with. So that can be done either in ArcGIS Online using some of our templates, which are completely out of the box and they're industry specific, but they don't tie you to a particular schema. You can actually use the template to get started, but then change the schema as you see fit for your particular organization. Once that's been done, your next step is to add that feature layer to a web map and ultimately share that web map with a group that is accessible to the person who is going to be using collector. And then you're going to use that map in collector for ArcGIS. Now, presumably, most of you have done this before, so we won't go through that whole process, but I'm going to go ahead and start to show you, assuming that you've put all of these steps into place, right? You've created that data source, whether it's through ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Enterprise, or even using ArcGIS Pro to create your feature layer from scratch. Once you've done that, that feature layer is set up appropriately so that it can be used in collector. So you've enabled editing, you've added editor tracking, maybe you've synchronized it for your offline workflows. Once all of those steps have been put into place, your layer is now ready for you to add it to a web map. In adding it to a web map, there are just a few things that we often want to check here. As you can see on my slide, you want to enable offline mode if you're going to be in an area where you're going to have limited connectivity. And then you might want to try to search against certain layers while you're out in the field. So you'd set that up ahead of time while you're in the office as well, and maybe even configure things like pop-ups and such, so that the field workers in the field can actually take advantage of some of that functionality. A lot of the required steps are very clear, but then things like setting up pop-ups or reference data, those are optional steps that you can actually perform in the office. So what does this actually look like when we're out in the field? So bear with me for a second. I'm going to switch over to my mobile device and give you a sense of what you've set yourself up for. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to switch over here and share my mobile device. So Brian, just let me know when that is on the screen, please.
Okay. It's coming up now. It says double click to enter full screen mode. Okay, I see your device.
Perfect. Okay, so now I'm sharing my screen, and everyone should be able to see. I've got a couple of Esri apps here available. I'm going to go ahead right away, and I'd like to show you quick integration of Collector and Survey123. So for the purposes of this actual demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and start in Survey123. Now, Survey123 is also a field collection application, but it's more form-centric, so it's not necessarily driven by the map. So hence the need for that integration. Maybe you start by collecting information within a form, and then through that form, you can actually call a particular web map that is the foundation for Collector. And so that's essentially what we're going to do here. So I've got a number of different forms here on my device, but I'm particularly interested in my invasive pest monitoring form. So that's the form I'm going to go ahead and launch, and I'm going to use that for my collection activity. So as I launch that form, it's got some attributes here that I may be interested in entering. So right now, I'm just going to fill out this because it's a default field, and so we want this to actually work, right? And maybe a site number here. Okay, and I'm going to scroll all the way down here because this is the integration point that I'm particularly interested in. So I have created what we call a URL scheme under the designated extent, and I've taken that URL scheme and I've embedded the ID of a particular web map. So if I were to hit right here where it says monitoring site extent, so assuming that I've filled out this entire form and I get down here to my extent, and here's where I want to launch Collector so that I can actually use it as part of my collection activity. So I'm going to go ahead and tap monitoring, and it automatically launches my collector map. So that's the quick integration between Collector and Survey123. I started in Survey123. I'm capturing information that's more form-centric, and then I embed a URL scheme for Collector using the ID of the collector map, and now it launches Collector right away, opens up the map, and I can actually start to collect information at that particular location. So just that simply, you're using both mobile applications to start to collect some information.
Very nice.
So one other point I'd like to make about that integration. So in this particular instance, I was really just interested in opening a map. So in my URL scheme, and I'll show you further on in my presentation what that looks like. I essentially just added the ID to the map so it launches this map. But you may want to actually launch a map and have it open at a very specific location. So there are ways for you to actually embed the latitude and longitude of a very specific location within your map if that's precisely where you're going to be collecting information from. So just a little tip and trick there in terms of integrating multiple applications. So now I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint for a brief second, so bear with me. Okay, let's get back to our PowerPoint here.
Okay.
Okay, good, perfect. So essentially, just as a quick recap, so how were we able to launch Collector? Well, we create a feature layer, we embed that feature layer into a web map. That web map has an editable layer in it. It's shared with a particular group. We turn on some of the capabilities that we would like, maybe offline support or editor tracking, and then we're able to launch Collector and start to work with it right away. Now, I'm going to go into this in a bit more depth, but I'm using Collector, the latest version of Collector, which is a little bit different from Collector Classic. So I'm not sure what our audience is using, but if you're not using the latest version, then you may not have access to some of these tools. But some of the things to highlight in this newer version of Collector, which I'm going to go into in a bit more detail in the next part of our demonstration, is you still have your typical things like your layer list and your bookmarks and the ability to switch between various base maps, the GPS location, but we've moved a few things like the add feature. So when you actually want to start collecting, that's at the bottom of the screen now, and it's a little bit more accessible to you. And then we also have this sliding panel, so you can actually have the entire map as part of the screen when you're interested in doing the collecting or placing a point or capturing a polygon or a line. But once you start to add the attributes, you can slide your panel up and have it take up the entire device so that you can actually enter the information you're interested in. The other thing is a nice GPS banner that shows you what your GPS accuracy is. But probably the most exciting is the new location target, which in a second, when I show you, it makes for an easier workflow in terms of actually capturing information. So in the next section of our demonstration, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to show you how you can take Collector and use it in an offline mode. And then we'll go through some of these features that we have highlighted on the screen. So what do we need to do to take Collector offline? Well, there's really two approaches. The first approach is a pre-planned approach. And what that means is that you would define your area of interest in the office, defined in the map, and there's no limit to the area of interest that you can define, because it's really, the limit is really the size of your device. So if you have enough space on your device, that pre-planned area is going to get stored on that device, and then you can pull it up and start to work with it. The other option is the on-demand map areas. So that option allows you to define your area of work or your area of interest within the app. You have to be in connectivity, but you're doing this all on the app as opposed to doing it in ArcGIS Online, in the web map, or in ArcGIS Enterprise. Then once either of these approaches have been put into place, you'll download your area of interest and start to work with it within your device. So let's go ahead and do that and show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back one more time, and bear with me for switching back and forth. I want to try to keep this as interactive as possible. Okay, so getting back to my device here, and Brian will let me know when that device is up on the screen.
I'm still waiting for it. It says double click to enter full screen mode.
Okay,
there you go.
should be there. And so I'm going to go ahead and launch one of my maps. So we're going to look for a particular map here, agriculture asset map. And so our map is readily available to us. I've got my options to turn layers on and off. You can see all those options there. The base map option, really easy and clear, pretty straightforward in terms of working with it. We have this new option here in terms of capturing information. So we've got this little target here that allows me to capture information nice and easily. So I can, you know, drop a point anywhere on the map. Maybe I want to start to capture a polygon, and as you see, the user experience is a bit more seamless in terms of how you can start to capture information, right? And one of the things I want to point out is that within the screen, as I'm capturing the information, you can see the polygon acres, you know, slowly building up. The other thing you can quickly see right away is that all within the same screen here, I can quickly take a photo or, you know, add an attachment if I need to. Scrolling up, I can start to add the attributes for that particular area that I'm capturing. Um, the other option is here is, you know, you can start to create things like offsets, or if you were in a position where you were moving, you can actually hit the start streaming there and start to stream your location. So everything has been embedded very nice and neatly within this interface. If I need the entire interface, I can do that. If I need just part of the interface and I want to get rid of the attributes, I can scroll down and get rid of those attributes as well. Okay. So again, all of these maps here on my screen are all editable maps that I have access to. But the point of this particular part of the demonstration is to take the map into offline mode using the on-demand map area. So I'm going to do that all within the app. So what I tap on is I'm going to add an offline area. And essentially what it does is it gives me the option to define an area of interest that I would like to take offline. So right now I've got the entire screen, but I'm going to go ahead and tap here on my level of detail and choose how detailed of an area that I would be interested in working with. So you've got a couple of options here similar to what you would have in ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Enterprise. So I can start all the way at the world or continent level and get as detailed as down to small buildings or at the room level. And so once I tap that, I just hit download area. It starts to download my area of interest. And as soon as that download is done, that area is available to you on the device and you can start to work with that area. So we're going to let that continue to download, and then I'm going to switch over to ArcGIS Online and show you how to create a pre-mapped area in the office prior to coming out and not necessarily on the device. So I'm going to stop sharing my device. I'm going to pull up our ArcGIS Online now. Oops, it looks like someone else is sharing there.
Oh, there's someone else sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Edward, can you stop sharing? See if I can reshare it back out. Just 1 second. So now I think I was sharing. I'm going to release it.
Okay. Okay. There we go. Thank you. Okay. And you should be seeing my screen now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So recapping where we are, I'm back in ArcGIS Online. So this should be a familiar page to a lot of folks. I'm in the detailed view of a particular map. This is the overview section. In order to take this particular map offline, what I would do is go into settings and scroll down to this offline section here. So you can see it's enabled for offline mode. So it's already ready for me to take it into offline mode. But what I'm interested in doing is actually defining a very specific area, similar to what I just showed in the application. So in this particular case, I would click Manage Areas, and it's going to launch an interface that allows me to choose my area of interest. Obviously, I can zoom out and you can see the full extent, but if I were just interested in focusing on this area where I've already started some data collection, but now I just want this area as my focal point on my device, I would go in here and create an area. And then one of the things you can do is just give it a nice name so that you can find it on your device, right? So I'm just going to call it demo area. And then the next thing you want to do is set the level of detail. Now, obviously, the more detailed you get, so if I take it all the way down to the room level, then the bigger the package is actually going to be on my device. So if you're not interested in doing any work at this level, I would limit your scale right down to the level at which you think you're going to be collecting data. So I think anything between, for my interest here, town right down to maybe small buildings would be of interest to me, right? And then the next thing you want to do is actually sketch out the area that you're interested in. So I'm going to sketch out this particular area right here as my area of interest, right? So the next thing I could do is hit save, and then it'll start to download the package. But just in case maybe I made a mistake and I didn't get the area I needed, I can actually select that box and maybe move it a little bit and adjust it so that it actually covers the entire area that I'm interested in. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and then it starts to package that particular area, right? So that's the area that I've chosen so far. So right now it's packaging that particular area, and it'll be available to me in Collector. So we're going to switch back to Collector one more time, at least one more time, so that we can see the area that we are interested in. So lots of switching back and forth here. Oh, looks like someone else is sharing their screen again.
Is that happening again? I'm not sure what's going on there. All right, there we go. Can you share?
Actually, it looks like it's yours. Might be your screen somehow, Brian.
Let's see here. My apologies. Not sure what is going on. There we go.
It's not quite coming across on my end.
All right, so let's see if I can do this. My apologies, everybody. So anybody who's sharing, I'm going to mute all real fast, and then I should be able to unshare them. I'm not seeing who shared. Try this one more time. Oh, Edward.
Okay, now Edward is sharing.
We got it here, I think. All right, see if you can do it.
Yep. Okay. So I think it's in my control now.
Okay.
Folks, sorry about that.
Apologies.
Okay.
Double click on your screen.
Yeah, you guys should be seeing my screen now.
There.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to go back into Collector. And right off the bat, we can see my offline areas there. It's the very first one. The previous one I did, and there's the new one called Demo Area. It's on my device. I can go ahead and download that particular area. It'll quickly download, and it's available for me to actually use. And if you can see, it's just that extent. It's cut off because I've been very specific about the area that I'm actually interested in collecting against. I can collect a new a new block feature at that particular location. It's telling me that it's outside of my threshold, but I'm going to use that location anyway, and I'm able to capture a nice point at that particular location. I can undo that very quickly if I don't like what I've got. The point here is that I have created an area, a specific package for an area that I'd like to take offline. So I don't have to have any connectivity whatsoever to be able to collect at this particular location. So while I've got my device still on, the next thing I'd like to show you is the integration with high accuracy. So that's a key feature of Collector, and so I'd like to take the next few minutes to show you how that would actually be done. So I'm going to be using an Arrowed Gold GPS device, but the first thing you want to do is actually go into the settings of your mobile application and make sure that the device is paired. So as you can see there at the very top of my list, I have an Arrow Gold GPS device. So that's the particular device that I'm going to be using for this next part of the demonstration. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Collector because there are a few things in Collector that we actually have to be able to set up for this to work. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is actually start in my profile. So I tap on my profile, and right now I'm in the profile settings for Collector. And there's a lot of information here. There's accuracy, GPS averaging, a lot of metadata that you would ultimately need to set up. The area that I'm most interested in is right here in the center under location. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually set up a location provider. Now, I'm using an Arrowed Gold receiver for high accuracy data collection. So that's the receiver that I'm particularly interested in. So if I were to tap on the provider, now there's two options because I've already done this at some stage, so you can already see the EOS positioning system. But right now it's actually using the integrated receiver, so it's using the built-in receiver that is part of my that's part of my mobile device. But the idea here is that the built-in receiver is not accurate enough, so we're going to use an external receiver. So if I didn't have this EOS already set up, what I would do is I would actually tap on this plus sign right here, and any receivers that I have Bluetooth enabled, they would show up here in a list. Because the only receiver I have within proximity of me is the one that's already paired, it's right here showing up in my list. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that one, and that's the receiver that we're now integrated with. Now, interestingly, if I tap on that eye there, so I just tapped on the information, what that actually does is if you're considering capturing vertical height or elevation, this is where you would actually enter something like the antenna height, or if you have a range pole that you're using. So you would actually enter that information there where it says 0, and then you would hit done. But we're not going to use that at this particular stage. So once that's done, I'm going to go back out. And the next thing I want to do is actually set up my location profile. So I'm going to tap on profile. Again, I've used this device in the past, so the RTK is already set up. But let's talk through what's actually happening here. So if what I'd like you to take away from this is that right now it's using the default, which is if I tap on the information, it's WGS 1984. So if you use the default and don't configure a correction service, you're basically making the assumption that your corrections are on WGS 1984 datum. But if you're actually using like NAT83, you want to actually go in here and make the necessary changes. So let's start by setting this up and showing you setting up a base station, which in our case, we would generally use a NAT83 2011 base station. That's what we often use here at Esri. And I would go in and hit add, and then I would search for NAT83 2011. So I could just start typing in here, NAT83, and I know it should pop up here. Let's just make sure. Yeah. So there's all of the various NAT83 datums that I would be interested in using. You choose the one of interest and basically go from there. Once you choose it, the next thing you want to do is actually define the coordinate system. Now your coordinate system is basically defined by your web map or the base map that your web map is actually using. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the information here on the RTK so that you can see some of the information that I'm using. So my map coordinate system is WGS 1984, Web Mercator Auxiliary Sphere. There's my datum transformation, and then I've got my GNSS coordinate system already set up as well. So once you have all of that set up, I actually name it so that I can, if I'm using a different receiver and I'm setting up my location profile again, I can distinguish between the RTK and maybe you know, another location profile that I've set up. Once that's done, the last thing you want to do is probably go into the collection accuracy. So right up here at the top, and here with the collection accuracy, it typically uses the default, which is in my case it's set to 30 feet, I believe is my default. I probably want to bring that down for the type of data I'm collecting. I'm going to bring that down to about 10 feet. Now this supports feet and it does support inches as well. And then once you're done with that, if you look further down here, we've got something we call this 95% confidence interval. Now, if you need a different method for reporting your accuracy, you can actually change that 95% confident interval and use that as your reporting. But the default is really RMS, which is about 68%. So we're just going to leave that off for now. And I'm going to go ahead and hit done. And now if I were to go into, if I were outside in a situation where I'm actually using the GPS receiver to actually collect information, if you look at my map, I'm just going to pull one of these maps up, you'll see that it's saying connecting to device. So it's actually trying to connect to my device, but it's not going to find that GPS location, obviously, because I'm indoors. So what we've just gone through is the basic per user setting of high accuracy. And in this case, we're using an EOS receiver. You would ideally also use a third-party EOS app to configure a connection to your base station. And then you would start to stream to get an RTK connection. And then you can start to take advantage of collecting data at a very high or at a highly accurate rate with Collector for ArcGIS. So just as an FYI, in this particular case, I'm using this EOS device, but there are lots of other devices out there that you can use. Some of the other common devices that we've often seen include the Bad Elf GNSS Surveyor. That's a common one that we've seen some of our customers use. Obviously, the EOS suite of receivers. The one I'm using is an Arrow Gold, but there's an Arrow 100 or an Arrow 200. I've seen folks use the Garmin GLO, which is another useful one. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Trimble R1 or the Trimble R2, and I think even now they have the R10 Model 2. So these are all devices that pair very well with Collector. Not advocating for any one in particular, but just these are a few options. I would talk to your local provider and just see what device falls within your budget and fits within your collection methods in terms of how you would like to start collecting information out in the field. So with that, I think we have about 14, maybe 15 minutes. And Brian, I presume we have some time to address some
We
questions from some folks.
we do. Let me throw one very quickly at you. Using a high accuracy GNSS device, what is the best vertical accuracy that you've seen, plus or minus? Is it a couple inches, centimeters? What is your arrow getting you?
So with my arrow, it's centimeter accuracy. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
yeah, and that may be too accurate for some folks. It all depends on what you on what the workflow is and what you're collecting. But with this particular arrow, it gets a centimeter accuracy. I was recently working in a vineyard, and you know they were capturing the space between the vines, and they're generally spaced, you know, a couple feet apart. So the centimeter accuracy was more than enough for what we were interested in. I've seen some colleagues in the utility space where they're collecting water meter locations, and sometimes you have a cluster of meters within a very small space, and that's where you see that centimeter accuracy often becoming extremely useful. So it's truly a function of the workflows and what you're interested in. On my screen I've got a vineyard here that I would be collecting. Centimeter accuracy would be overkill in this particular case.
sure.
If I could get within a couple of feet and get me all the information that I need for that particular vineyard, that's fine.
Trying to use this for a UAS and tied it in with RTK, the Phantom DJI Phantom RTK, and getting ground control points, centimeter plus or minus 1 to 2, 3 centimeters is going to probably meet your needs just fine.
Yes, certainly,
Yep.
absolutely, and we've had a number of folks doing precisely that.
Okay, perfect. Danielle, I've unmuted you. Ali, I'm going to unmute you as well if you all want to jump in. There's a question here for you, and this is going back to your offline. Can you import an area of interest, like a buffer of a project area, when creating a map area, rather than drawing a box, because you drew the polygon box?
Absolutely. So remember when we started, we talked about Collector being built on those fundamentals of ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. And what we're getting at there is that Collector uses a web map, right? So that web map is your foundation. If that buffer layer is if that buffer is a layer within that web map, you can define that area of interest and make sure that whatever layers are included within that area of interest, and they will be part of that offline package.
Okay. Real quick here, there is a specific question about Arrow, so I don't want to put you on the spot since you're not advocating we go with Arrow, but someone had a question that said that, okay, when you collect using Arrow, the ortho height populates in the attribute table, but when they bring and export the data out to a file geodatabase, they lose the ortho height. Have you noticed this, or do you know this to be a bug, or have you ever heard of it?
So the ortho height, is that attribute part of the schema of the feature layer when they're in? So if it's part of the schema of the feature layer, it should populate like the question said, and that data should all be available. I have not seen that
Okay.
behavior, but I can follow up and check on that behavior. So a lot of times to collect that metadata for that high accuracy, you certainly need to make sure that your feature layer has those attributes in the data schema. In the event that it does not, what you can do is there's a GP tool in ArcGIS Pro that allows you to embed those attributes into the feature layer if they're not already there. That way, when you start to capture with the high accuracy GPS device, the data is being put in the right place.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. And Karen, if you want to email us at ERISA, I will. I can pass along if you have a data set some to Elvis, and if you
Yeah,
want to follow up personally with this, because that's a good question.
that's a great question.
It's
We'd
always
love to
interesting.
follow up on that one.
Yeah. I got another question here from Casey. Um, let's see here. I guess right now she has a very clunky workflow for exporting pictures from the collection feature service. In most cases, I want the picture name the same as the point name attribute. Do you know of any quick and easy ways to do this? So
That's a great question. So I tend to script it. So I can follow up with Karen and maybe share with her some of my experience in trying to do the same thing. And and I don't know how comfortable everyone in the audience is with scripting, but using Python to actually script that process and make sure that the you know the point or whatever you're capturing is named appropriately relative to whatever the attachments are. But I can follow up with her if that's okay.
yeah, sure, sure,
Yeah.
and that was Casey, so and I will pass that along to you. But is
Yeah.
there a script available that you know of on your all site that people can have access to, or is this more of a specialized, just talk to the specialist?
I don't know of one that's readily available to everyone, but we have some internally that we have used with customers that
Okay.
there's nothing special about them per se that we can share, and you would just adjust it to your specific parameters.
Okay.
So
Yeah. If
I would definitely like to follow up on that one. That sounds really intriguing, and that's what scripting can really help you do.
yeah, yeah, I've done that a bunch of times in the past. So yeah, that'd be great. We definitely would like to follow up on that one, and if it's a tool we can pass along to folks, I'm sure they'd really appreciate it. So oh yeah, yeah, and people are commenting they'd love to see that Python code as well, or if you've already got it, Python code script or embedded in a toolbox, that would be fantastic. So
Okay.
um, let me see here. Anybody else have any questions? Um, I think let's see here. Okay. On the same topic, can you export a selection of the collection feature service? Say I have 100 point, but I only want 20.
Okay. So say that again.
So, can you export a selection of the collection feature service? Say I have 100 point, but I only want 20. So I'm assuming within AGOL they want to
Yeah.
select you. Yeah, you just grab your points and export those out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would actually advocate just, depending on how those points are stored, if they're hosted feature services, then I would just bring them into ArcGIS Pro and do my selection in there. It would be so much much more feasible. But yes, the answer is yes, you can.
And well, we got a couple minutes here. So what do you have? Okay, let's say someone wanted to bring in easily their data that they collected in the field, and they wanted to bring it on over to their GIS portal if they have an organizational portal. Is that a simple task? Would you prefer scripting, FME, or what's the easiest way to do that?
Scripting is one way you can go about that. The other way you can go about that is depending on how they're collecting the data. If they're collecting the data basically through ArcGIS Online, through mobile workflows, and then they want that to reflect in their portal. One of the things we advocate is collaboration. So you set up a collaboration between your ArcGIS Online and your portal so that that information is seamlessly pushed through. And those are some resources I can share with this group as well in terms of how we advocate folks go about doing that.
Okay, and does and I know this is a third-party software, but does that collaboration work? Um, is there any hiccups compared to? I know some people are talking about GeoJob these days and using those administrative tools. Are they pretty comparable, or are you
Yeah,
familiar?
yeah. So the biggest difference between the GeoJob administration tools and something like collaboration that's set up between maybe AGOL and a portal is that collaboration is inherent within the software. It's just something that you set up so long as you have a group that is the collaborating group for data to go back and forth. And the neat thing about collaboration is that you can schedule it, so you can have it scheduled to push or pull information at certain times, which goes along with one of the newer features in Collector is the auto sync ability. Previously, we'd work offline, and then you'd have to remember that when you do get back online, you need to hit sync on your device so that it syncs those the data points collected back to your organization or to your database. Now with the auto sync capability in Collector, you just tap on the auto sync, and what happens is you can you have different sync intervals. So the default is 15 minutes. You can set it 30 minutes, an hour. And basically what's going to happen is every 15 minutes, if that's the interval you set it on, the device is going to check to see if it has connectivity. And if it does, it'll sync up, it'll sync things back up. And if you have that collaboration set up, they'll just push things to where they need to go.
Okay, fantastic.
So
Um, let's see here. One more question. I know we got 4 minutes. We might as well take advantage. People are asking a lot of questions today. Okay, it says, following up on the export issues here, it says when I bring the feature class and export them, do the attachments come with them? So basically, to clarify, if I bring the 100 points into ArcGIS Pro, select 20 points, and then export them, will the attachments come with the selection exported?
Yes, they should. They should, and I can clarify that and just test it myself. I just recently got back from the field. I did something similarly, and I had no problems. My attachments were part of that.
Okay. Yeah, I typically just download it all as a backup and kind of, and then do it that way. So now I do have a question for you, and this is, I think it's on par, but let's say I build a web map. Let's say I do a data collection app. Let's say I turn it into a web map and then I put it into a web application. What is the easiest way? So I create it within my organization. What if I want to push it to a client's organization, or I want to share it with someone else that has AGOL in their organization? Is there an easy way to do that? Or do they have to own something? Or
yeah, so that's where that collaboration piece comes in, right? Okay. So you can set up a collaboration between the two organizations. You would typically invite someone in that organization into a group of yours.
Okay.
And that's where I would put the information so that they only have access to that information. So give you a use case. Customer on the West Coast I'm working with, they invite me to a group within their organization. You accept that invitation within your organization, and then you have access to that content.
Okay, so if we both have AGOL, then basically it's a group setting. Set the group up, share. They can see it and they can copy it over to their organization.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that and to make sure, because I've had some other people asking some questions, but since I had you here, I was like, all right, let me ask. So, why? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and these are all, I think it may be ideal if we can, if we get these questions, I can actually provide the resources to all of these answers. So I think that would be useful for folks if they're interested.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're pretty much out of time. Elvis, we really appreciate your time, and it was a fantastic presentation. We had a couple little share issues, but that's pretty darn minimal. It was great content, and we really appreciate it. We had, at my count, a total of 84 people in attendance today, which is pretty good for the 1st of October. But with that said, everybody contact us to Eureka, Texas. Go to our website if you want to be a member. Go ahead and join up. And Elvis, once again, fantastic job, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, and we will be posting this to our YouTube channel very shortly. Y'all take care, and we'll see you in a number of weeks.
Cheers.
Okay, take care.